The Pentagon says a U.S. fighter jet has downed an armed drone belonging to pro-Syrian government forces in southern Syria. The U.S. military claims that UAV displayed hostile intent and that the coalition didn't seek fight with pro-Assad forces, but it will defend itself. RT's Jacqueline Vuga has the details of the incident.
The U.S. fighter jet has shot down an Iranian-made pro-Syrian regime drone in southern Syria at approximately 12:30 a.m. local time. Now, Al-Tamf is a town on the Syrian border where U.S. troops are in fact training Syrian rebels. The statement claims the drone displayed hostile intent and advanced on coalition forces. This is in fact the third pro-Syrian aircraft they've shot down just this month. A second drone was downed on June the 8th in the same area, and on Sunday, the U.S.-led coalition shot down a Syrian government plane in the country's north. Now, many felt that move was a step too far, even prompting a reaction from the UN.
It does bring up more broadly our deep concern about the risk of possible miscalculation and escalation in the conflict in Syria.
Overall, there have been 5 attacks by the U.S. on pro-Syrian government forces in recent months. In all cases, they've claimed actions were taken in self-defense and that the coalition does not seek confrontation with the Syrian government. But their actions are sending a very different message at this point.
And with the drone shot down earlier marking the third pro-government aircraft shot down in the last month, questions are mounting over the true mission of U.S. forces in the region. And to discuss the heightening tension in Syria's airspace and the situation on the ground, we are joined now by former Pentagon official Michael Maloof and former CIA officer Ray McGovern. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And Michael, I'd like to start with you. We know the U.S. has shot down the second Iranian-made armed drone within the past 12 days. What signal is the U.S. trying to send here?
Well, it's tactically trying to send a signal that it's not going to allow Shiite forces, namely Iran, to come into a certain area in the southern part of Syria. First of all, the United States was never invited there into Syria. Secondly, we're putting in more and declaring for ourselves deconfliction zones, which nobody agrees with, and it's leading to increased tensions. And I think what it's paving the way for, and this is just my supposition and analysis at this point, we're laying the groundwork not only to impede the flow of Iranian flow of supplies through from Tehran to Beirut, but also to establish positioning for a base in a post-war so-called stabilization effort. But it may get out of hand before that happens.
I see. And Ray, to you, we know that the Russian foreign minister has accused the U.S. of basically complying with terrorism, and now we have another drone being shot down. Do you agree with that stance?
Well, as Michael said, we have no business being in Syria. I mean, it used to be that we followed international law. The Russians were invited into Syria, the same with the Iranians. We not so much. So self-defense is too much of a stretch. We can't judge, we can't justify what we're doing with self-defense. You really can't look at U.S. policy in this part of the world without realizing that Israel and its interests are paramount here. Back in 2013, when Obama was just about to push the button for an overt attack, shock and awe on Syria, the head of the New York Times Jerusalem Bureau, Jody Ruderman, went to see some high-level Israeli officials, and she said, "What's your preferred outcome in Syria?" And they said, "Well, this is a little embarrassing. It's not humanitarian, but our preferred outcome is no outcome." And she said, "Traduisez, s'il vous plaît." What do you mean, no outcome? And this appeared in the New York Times. I don't want to misquote it. This is what he said. This is Alain Pincus, who used to be Consul General in New York. Quote, "This is a playoff situation in which you need both teams to lose, but at least you don't want one to win. We'll settle for a tie," said Alain Pincus. "Let them both bleed, hemorrhage to death. That's the strategic thinking here. As long as this lingers, there's no real threat to Israel, from Syria. Now, this presupposes that nobody's winning, okay? That's why they wanted the U.S. in toward the end of 2013, because Bashar al-Assad was beginning to win. Now he's beginning to win again. That's why we're seeing all this activity.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Israel. There's a lot of controversy going on. I mean, some people are saying that Israel is funding terrorists. I mean, we understand that Israel is providing humanitarian support and also medical supplies to the Syrian rebels. What is your take on this, Michael?
It's been going on for quite some time, actually, especially in the Syrian Golan. It was in January of 2015, for example, that the Israelis killed Jihad Mughniya, the son of Imad Mughniya of Hezbollah, and also some Quds generals, some Quds forces generals from Iran, thinking that they were planning they claimed that they were planning an attack on northern Israel, but in fact it was to prevent ISIS and other jihadi Salafist groups from occupying the Golan. And there's been a lot of Salafist activities, jihadi Salafist activities in the Golan. But it's in Israel's interest to assist these Sunni radicals because of their relationship now with Syria. With Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and with Jordan. Those countries coming back together again are going to form that security blanket for Israel ultimately, and it's in Israel's interest to oppose Assad because they don't want him in there, and they want to promote the more Sunni elements there. But what they may get are the more radicalized forms.
Well, it's interesting because we don't hear a lot about Israel backing the Saudis very much.
Well, there's a tacit alliance here between Israel and the Saudis. It's most amazing. You know, if you look at the Golan, call me picayune or call me obsolete, but Israel has no business on the Golan. They seized that 50 years ago by a war of aggression, okay? Now everybody accepts, oh, that's the Israeli Golan. Well, there is no Israeli Golan. There's a Syrian Golan. Right. I've been there. It dominates the whole terrain of that part of the... So when you look at the Golan and you think about how the Israelis went up there 50 years ago, I think of the USS Liberty, which Israel attacked and tried to sink. Now we know that was intentional. There's intercepted messages and everything else. But the question is why? And it was the day before they went up on the Golan, and we had been screaming at them, look, you know, you defeated everybody else. Don't go up on the Golan. They didn't want us to know they were going to do that, and so they tried to sink the intelligence ship that would have told Washington, whoops, now they're going up the Golan. So this Golan thing is important to Israel, but it's also very important to the Arabs, to the Syrians, and to the Russians and Iranians as well. And Iran, of course, is the ultimate target of all this. They don't want Iran to be able to supply Hezbollah across Syria.
And one of the reasons why Hezbollah was up there, and I've spoken to a number of their people in Beirut recently, was to prevent ISIS and the other Salafist groups from attacking Lebanon. And that still remains a big fear, although it's quiet for now. But there has been heightened concerns about it. And you've had it in the Kalamun Mountains in Syria that border along Lebanon. Anything can happen there at any time, and fortunately, the Lebanese army has been very effective to stymie any effort by the Salafists at this point.
And Hezbollah. And part of the army.
Yeah, they're part of the army.
And so you expect an increase in Israeli attacks there?
Yes, not only there, but also along that entire corridor in Syria, because they don't want Assad to succeed. They don't want Iran to succeed. And that corridor will represent a supply line, a definite supply line for Iran to provide to Hezbollah ultimately to protect Lebanon.
Running out of time, but quickly, so the U.S.'s role here now in Syria, do you guys see it changing anytime soon?
You can't understand it unless you realize that we're doing Israel's bidding, that we have no real policy of our own. Israel wants chaos in Syria. It's very hard to resupply Hezbollah from Iran through Syria if there's chaos there. And we are stirring the pot there with our president having devolved responsibility for these military operations to his generals. I've never seen the like of it.
And I would say that our participation is actually going to accelerate, and it's going to get us more embroiled before it's over.
Interesting. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Sure.
Appreciate your
Most welcome,
time.
Natasha.
Ray McGovern and Michael Maloof.